Hello friends, I welcome all of you to my new lecture session on proteins and amino acids. So here in this session we will discuss in detail about chemistry and significance of proteins. Proteins are so unique in our biochemistry because they are responsible for all kinds of functions that you can see in a living organism. So behind all critical biochemical events, whenever and wherever some kind of work is happening, that work ultimately is because of a protein. Proteins are the critical functional units of our biochemical mechanisms. So let's go ahead and see how actually proteins got these amazing capability to participate in biochemical events and do work for us. In human body, we all knew that major chemical categories that we have are carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids and proteins. Among all these, carbohydrates and lipids are majorly considered as sources of energy, and nucleic acids are meant for genetic information, okay, to maintain our genetic information. And then proteins are meant for functions. Okay, so proteins are meant for functions as well as to offer us structural integrity. Okay, because let's say if you wanted to define characteristics of life, they all are more like responsiveness. Responsiveness is the preliminary criteria to show that an organism is alive or dead. So this responsiveness quite often is linked to action reaction sequence. Okay, action reaction sequence. Let's say if you are calling that, if you call somebody by name, so they will respond to you. Okay, so in this you will see something we call it as work. Physical work will be there all the time. Physical work means like this. Okay, if somebody calls you by name, you turn your head or otherwise you will respond. So in all these you will clearly see change in your physical posture. This physical movement actually is happening because of work. To do any kind of work we need energy and then physical movement. So whatever biochemical faculties that we have which are able to make use of energy to achieve physical movement. Okay, so this type of setup we have in proteins. Energy that is derived from lipids and carbohydrates is utilized to perform work via physical movement. So this is possible only with proteins. Okay, so how it is possible? Why only proteins are able to do this one? Why only proteins are able to do this reversible tasks? That we will see in detail in the coming slides. Okay, so these are the questions which we are asking in the beginning, and now we will start getting information from existing science. To begin with, the first question that we need to ask is, what is a protein? A protein is a linear polymer made up of different types of amino acids. Okay, so in natural proteins, existing proteins, we will have as many as 23 amino acids are there. Okay, 23 different amino acids are there. So they can join with each other. Amino acid means you have a substitution, carbon, and here you will have amino group and a COOH group attached to a carbon. This is a chiral carbon, and 100% amino acids that are there in natural proteins are always levorotatory. So here alterations will come because of the substituent group. Okay, by giving different kinds of substitutions, now we have around we have 23 amino acids which are making all the proteins that are there in our body. So here in forming this type of a bond, so how amino acids are joined together? NH COOH. Okay, so this reacts with carboxylic acid group of the second amino acid. Okay, so and then the chain will grow like this, NH, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is an amide bond because this is a part of a protein, so we call it as peptide bond. Okay, this is a peptide bond. So this is the way how this linear polymer is actually made up of. So we can have different types of R's so that this chain will have different constitution. So this is the way how amino acids are joined together to form a peptide chain. Okay, so in here every one of these bubbles is actually one amino acid. If you think like that, then we have 23 different types of amino acids which can form, which can give so much of diversity to this chain. Okay, it is like different colored beads containing necklace. Okay, if it is like that, if you alter if you alter amino acids over here, you will get different type of a protein chain. That's the reason why in our body you can find millions of proteins. For example, if you take enzymes, in kinase enzymes, we have around 525 types of proteins are there. Okay, so that's the reason why. Let's say if you have 100 different 100 amino acids containing chain is there, we have 23 amino acids are there. So how many possibilities are there? 100 to the power of 23. These many possibilities will be there. So in the protein, though the amino acids are adding a lot to the diversity, we need to see at different levels protein structure is to be perceived. Okay, the amino acid sequence of a protein is what we call it as primary structure. The two-dimensional motifs of specific regions in the protein, which will give you helical structure or beta sheaths or otherwise loops, is what we call it as secondary structure. And the total three-dimensional structure of a protein, of a monomer, protein monomer, is what we call it as a ternary structure. So normally proteins, they usually don't work alone. So that's the reason why 2, 3, if this is one protein and here another protein and here the same third protein and fourth protein. So this is like a tetramer. Sometimes the proteins, they together do the job. So that's the reason why this kind of a structure is what we call it as quaternary structure. Okay, so primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. So at this level we need to have the idea regarding structure of a protein. So this is the quaternary structure of the protein, is what actually gives us a function. Okay, so the function is dependent on the three-dimensional structure of the protein, which is dependent on the amino acid sequence of the protein. So that's the reason why amino acid sequence is very, very important for us. Next, when you compare different types of polymers that are existing in nature, okay, so in nature how many different types of polymers are there? We have carbohydrate polymers. Carbohydrate polymers are there, like amylose or amylopectin, or this one cellulose. Okay, so all these are polymers, but in these we don't much bother about the protein folding or otherwise three-dimensional structure of the compound, because they are only food material for us, where we derive energy. So energy to do work. Whereas in case of proteins, as I told you, proteins actually are providing us function. Okay, so let me make it very simple. Your hand does one job, your eye has one job, your ears have another job. So this is what we call it as function. Every one of them have different 3D structure, structural flexibility, okay, structural or conformational flexibility, and functional organization. So all of them are completely unique. So in case of proteins, because they are behind every function of a tissue or a cell or a biochemical reaction, hence for achieving different varied actions, because here also for a hand to work or eye to work or an ear to work, we need a protein. So to do all these varied jobs, proteins need to have different physical shapes. Okay, so that's the reason why proteins need to go into different shapes, three-dimensional shapes. So there it is possible how proteins have this facility to twist and fold, which can provide unique shape and structure to a protein. So let's see that. So let's say if we take an amino acid sequence containing glycines. Why are we taking glycines? Because in case of glycine, you take this one. Okay, N C OH. So this is glycine, and here we have the peptide bond, and here we have the peptide bond. Okay, so this is only a two-dimensional representation of the protein. So if you see in the three-dimensional shape and structure, okay, so the conformational flexibility across bonds help us understand the three-dimensional shape and structure of any organic compound. So how come? It means because one easy thing that you can correlate to this problem is like cyclohexane flips between chair form and boat form. Okay, because it tries to stay in chair form because of low energy. Okay, low energy, so it will stay in chair form. So this is the concept which we are going to bring here, where steric hindrance forces a molecule to attain a particular three-dimensional shape. So here we have a nitrogen here, C. Here you will have R, and then here this is the C double bond O, and here is the amide bond we have here, and then we have the carbon, alpha carbon, and we'll have R here, and then C double bond O, and the chain will go on. If you focus here, okay, this is CN bond. CN bond means CN, here double bond O and NH. Amide bonds, because in organic chemistry you might have studied about this one, amide bonds can undergo keto-enol type of tautomerism, or we call it as lactam-lactim type of rearrangement. So that's the reason why amide bond is very strong. It is more than a single bond and less than a double bond. And because of attainment of a double bond, this CN bond is non-rotatable. Is considered as non-rotatable. Because of that, this acts like a plane, non-rotatable plane. On one side you have a substitution over here, and on the other side you have a substitution over here. So because if these substitutions, if they are very small, then you will not probably face any kind of a problem with steric hindrance, though they appear to be very away from each other, but they do show some kind of a steric hindrance. If you increase the size of the substituent, then they will try to stay away from each other. They will try to stay away from each other. So one of the functional group, because when protein is biosynthesized, amino acids are joined one by one. Okay, this we will see in protein polymerization or protein biosynthesis lecture. So if already, let's say, substitution is on this side, then oncoming protein, oncoming amino acid, if you have a substitution, then that will try to project away from the already existing substitution if the bulk is very high. Okay, so this is the way how the oncoming amino acid, let's say if this is also a bulky substituent A3, the bulk will be on the other side. So in that way, so it is like twist and twist, it is like that. Okay, so this is the actual reason behind a protein attaining a particular three-dimensional shape. If you see the three-dimensional structure, energy minimized three-dimensional structure of this peptide chain, you can see here, this is like a randomly arranged peptide chain. Okay, so there is no twists and turns, this is like a free chain. So at any point, because all these are rotatable bonds, here also all these are rotatable bonds, hence it can take any kind of shape and structure, no problem. But if you go to another peptide chain where we have heavy substitutions, like all these are phenylalanines and tyrosines. Okay, so here this amino acid is phenylalanine and this is tyrosine. This is also phenylalanine. So if you have heavy substitution over here, there will be significant steric hindrance between the two benzene rings. So that's the reason why one of them force the other away from each other. Hence, there is a possibility of attaining twists and turns. See here, you can clearly see here the twists and turns that we have. The chain over here is coming like this and then going inside and then is coming outside, and it is going on like that. Okay, so in one way, because this is a very small fragment, that's why I couldn't exactly draw this, so it will come like this. Okay, it will happen like that. So because of the steric hindrance that we have over here. So in a protein, if a flexible region is needed, you will have in these regions glycine, more of glycine, alanine, and then if you need structurally rigid regions like this or else beta sheets, etc. So here you will have heavy substitutions like phenylalanine, tyrosine or tryptophan, histidine, etc. Those containing amino acids will be kept over here. And whenever you need a sharp turn like this, okay, in those cases this amino acid is going to be useful to you. Okay, this is it, proline. Okay, proline rich regions, where because this offers a very rigid twists and turns. Twists and turns are possible because if it will go simply like this and all of a sudden it will turn. So these twists and turns are possible through structurally very rigid cyclic structure containing amino acids like proline. Okay, so I hope you understood the logic behind the reason why proteins are twisting and folding. So proteins are linear polymers, but if you see the twists and turns, you will ultimately see a very complicated picture. So I am going to show you a couple of pictures to let you know the complicated three-dimensional structures that a protein can achieve. And because right now we have so many computational tools are there through which we can easily understand the functional variation or functional diversity, structural diversity within a protein. Okay, so this is actually one model. This is what we call it a stick model, and now this is a cartoon model where we can clearly see the beta helical or helical structures and loop regions are there. So this is what we call it as beta sheaths. Okay, so through Ramachandran analysis, Okay, Ramachandran analysis, Ramachandran plot, Ramachandran analysis, we'll come to know, okay, in which region amino acids are twisted and turned so that we can decide whether it is helical, helix or loop, where so much of flexibility is there. In loop region we usually find lightly substituted amino acids like glycine, alanine, etc. And we also can see here, this is what we call it as sheets. Okay. So here, in fact, this actual protein, whatever I got from a PDB database, contained two proteins. So this is what I meant by quaternary structure of a protein. In case of quaternary structure of a protein is not always able to achieve its functionality, okay, alone. So that's the reason why in case of enzymes or otherwise some structural proteins also, they are associated with many other proteins to become functional. So here this particular protein is actually a dimer. So this is one protein and this is another protein. So this is what we call it as a quaternary structure. Okay. Now if you take a single protein, in the single protein you can see, okay, so these are all helical regions. So the pink region is what we call it as loops, and then here this region is beta sheets. Okay, so we have in a protein, you can clearly see that different regions are there. So why do we have these many regions? So helical structure is actually structurally very stable, whereas this loop region is highly flexible and this is semi-flexible. Okay, whenever twists and turns are needed, there you will find, okay, all these things. So here if you see this one, I just would like to tell you one give you some a simple example here, like if you take a scissor, okay, if you take a scissors is made up of, okay, scissors is made up of steel or iron or metal, okay, or a metal. And in case of a scissor, all these regions are really hard, and these hard and structurally rigid components are joined via a flexible hinge, okay, flexible hinge. So because here the job of a scissor is to move and in that process cut a piece of a cloth or a paper, okay. So in that process it must retain its shape and functionality, okay, so that we can reuse it. If you use the same kind of thinking over here, in case of a protein, it need to maintain its structure, it need to have rigid regions joined via flexible parts. Third one, it need to be functional, okay, like in case of scissor, we make movements in such a manner that it can all the movements that we can make, cutting movements that we can make with a scissor are all reversible. In functional, and to become functional, a protein need to do certain work which is reversible, okay, to do work that is reversible. Hence a protein need to contain, a functional protein need to contain, like in this case it is an enzyme. So an enzyme is it usually does its job by recognizing the starting materials, hold on to that, and then perform a chemical reaction and release them into the solution again. Hence it has to make certain physical movements which are possible only when it has structural rigidity and semi flexibility, okay. So this is the way how Flexibility as well as structural rigidity both are incorporated via having specific amino acid sequences for a protein in different regions. And this is another way to look at the protein. Okay, so whenever you look at a human being, what we can see is the outer structure only. Okay, so the outer structure, whatever we can see, both in terms of functionality as well as physicochemical properties, is only bulk property. Okay, so one of the bulk property we can perceive for a protein is solvent accessible region. Solvent accessible region. Okay, so here this solvent accessible region, if you see, or we call it as a surface, okay, molecular surface. So below this one, though we have that area that is not accessible. Let's say if you look at me, if your human body is there, we can access only up to skin. Okay, if you wanted to go inside, you have to cut through it. Means you are destroying the structure. So here the functionality is happening because you can see the finger-like projections over here, here, and empty pockets over here, here, and here. So these are all the pockets. Sometimes these pockets act as catalytic sites for enzyme. So the entire protein, okay, that is semi-flexible. So in these regions, let's say if this is the catalytic site, a compound will be there. So the compound is recognized, and then the compound will go inside, and then it does some kind of a job so that it will give you the product. Okay, the products will be there. So this is the way how protein 3D structure can be visualized and can be understood. See here, the internal structure is represented in this way, and solvent accessible region is the surface. So the protein is like a tool, is like a motor, is like an instrument, okay, which does its job because of its three-dimensional shape and structure, which ultimately is coming because of its amino acid sequence. So this is the big picture. Okay, so in these many ways we can visualize a protein. Friends, I hope you got a clear idea on the reason why proteins are having three-dimensional shapes, why three-dimensional shape of a protein is very important for its function. Okay, now, yeah, this is it. In case of this small region, one of the terminal we have, this is arginine amino acid, aspartic acid, glycine, and threonine. Okay, so this is actually the stick model we are representing over here, but the outside, the surface, whatever we have, is what we call it as solvent accessible region or molecular surface. So this is what actually is perceived as the bulk property that we can perceive from outside. We cannot see what is there inside. So this bulk property is what actually helps you understand the relation between its function and chemistry. Okay. Now, if you see in proteins, broadly two different types of proteins are there. One is a fibrous protein. The fibrous protein, largely it accounts for providing you the structure and physical movement. Physical movement means muscles, working of muscles, heart muscle, etc. Wherever you can see perceivable change in your physical movement, okay, physical shape and size. So that you can see because of the fibrous proteins. The second one is they contain enormous physical strength. Okay, so it is like if you have a single thread, it will be very weak. But if you wound and wound and wound, if you add 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different threads are there, now this is becoming a very big thread-like structure. Okay, so like this. Now this will have physical function like it can be your hair follicle or your muscle fiber. So in that case it will have enormous physical strength as well as functionality. And here the second kind of protein is a globular protein, which is relatively soluble in water and highly flexible. Okay, most of the enzymes that we have, and plasma proteins, all of them are globular proteins. Okay, now let's see some of the examples. See, as I told you, in case of fibrous proteins, so this is collagen fiber, and within the fiber, this is actually the molecule. So many such molecules or fibers are assembled to each other to give you this macromolecular structure, quaternary structure. So here each one of the fiber is made up of 3 different proteins, 3 protein fibers, this type of fibers. Okay, so this is the way how a fibrous protein is actually assembled to give us both functionality as well as physical strength. And this is the example for an enzyme. We have seen this one earlier. Now this is another very important question for which we need to find an answer. How proteins attain a stable 3-dimensional shape? So just now we have seen a 3-dimensional shape, which is an amazing arrangement. Okay, let's say if you see this loop regions as well as see the loop regions and then the helical structures, etc., all of them are aligned in a manner which is relatively very stable. How it is able to maintain its shape and size like this? Let's say if you take this small region, this could have gone like this and then like this and then like this and like this. Why it is not going like that? Why it is maintaining a stable 3-dimensional shape like this? That we need to understand. So here if you see within the molecule, okay, intramolecular interactions play a major role. See here in the protein, whatever I have shown you just now, in a small region I am showing you the kind of network of hydrogen bondings that will be there between various amino acids, functional amino acids, which are in close proximity. Let's say if you have a helix like this and then second helical region is going on like that, then an amino acid over here, if it is having negative charge, here you will have positive charge, so that they will have interaction. Or here you will have hydrogen bond donor and here hydrogen bond acceptor, so that you can have a hydrogen bonding between them. So like that you will have a network of interactions will be there. So these network of interactions will stabilize this protein in this 3-dimensional format. Innumerable number of interactions will be there. So all these interactions are reversible. Okay, all these interactions are reversible. So that's the reason why a protein can be like this, closely close to each other, and because from outside energy is coming, so that's the reason why sometimes it will move like this. Okay, slight movements are possible because the hydrogen bond formation, so it is getting stabilized because of the hydrogen bonds from either side. So sometimes they will pull on this side, sometimes they will pull on the other side. Okay, so let's say we have a chain like this, another chain like this, chain like this. So it is having hydrogen bonds on this side as well as on the other side. So that's the reason why sometimes some of these hydrogen bonds are sacrificed to maintain hydrogen bonds on the other side, or else they will cut down hydrogen bonds over here and try to make hydrogen bonds on the other side. Hence they will become sometimes closer to this chain, or else sometimes closer to the second chain. Okay, so this is what we call it as dynamics. But overall the structure is stabilized because of the network of hydrogen bonds that we have. Because one more point I wanted to add here, in amino acids you will find acidic amino acids, basic amino acids, polar amino acids, non-polar amino acids. Hence, two polar amino acids, let's say here we have a polar amino acid and here we have a polar amino acid, then obviously those two will have interactions. Let's say here this is histidine and then this is arginine. We have polar hydrogen bond donors and acceptors are there, so they are interacting. So here we have a carbonyl carbon is there, so it is interacting with the hydrogens in the nearby area. See here carbonyl carbon O is there and then here NH is there. So this H and O are interacting with each other. The number of interactions are very high. Salt bridge like interactions are coming. So these interactions will stabilize the three-dimensional shape of the molecule. Okay. So friends, I hope you got a very clear idea on why a protein is getting three-dimensional shape and how it is gaining stability, partial stability in that three-dimensional shape. Further, how flexibility also can come in that environment. Okay, so that is what we had discussed so far. Now, because as I told you, proteins are like motors, proteins are like instruments. They physically move and do jobs. Okay, let's say muscle contraction has to happen. Let's say muscle contraction has to happen. Then a protein has to get activated and shrink. Okay, physically it has to shrink. So while shrinking, it is physically moving. So that is actually translated into your flexing of muscles or movement of your hand or otherwise movement of your heart contraction, etc. So here we need to understand how actually proteins have got this unique capability to move. So I am showing here one animation which actually is because of so many such interactions. Okay, here as I told you, hydrogen bond interactions, they can happen. So here if you take this chain, okay, so sometimes it is coming nearer to the next near chains and sometimes it is going away from it. And if you see this loop and this loop also, so all of them are actually interacting with the environment in three-dimensional shape. Hence, sometimes some of the hydrogen bonds are formed, sometimes some of the hydrogen bonds are broken. But here we need to consider the internal energy. So internal energy will always fluctuate between a range. So in this range, the protein will have different type of interactions. Okay, sometimes the hydrogen bonds are formed, sometimes the hydrogen bonds are broken. But the network is maintained in such a manner that the protein will not lose its integrity. Okay, because you can see this region is highly flexible, whereas wherever we have the helical region is very much rigid. Okay, so in this way, this area acts like the cutting region in a scissor, whereas this region is offering the structural stability to the protein. Okay, next is I'll show you another very beautiful picture of an enzyme. See here, this is a result of a dynamics program kept on online, but I really like this animation. Here you can see almost all chains over here, all are moving. Okay, virtually they are all moving, but their movements are restricted. They are moving, so semi-flexible, but their movements are restricted. So this restricted movement is offering this entire enzyme stability, structural stability. Further, there are certain regions in the protein which are highly interactive, highly flexible. They have specific functional groups in such a manner that they can recognize such certain chemical molecules from outside. So this is an enzyme which is trying to recognize, which is recognizing a drug molecule. Okay, while recognizing the drug molecule, recognizing means it is going to make strong hydrogen bonds. So while making hydrogen bonds, let's say if the drug molecule is if the drug molecule is offering 4 hydrogen bonds by simply moving in this direction, but this movement, for making this movement, it has to sacrifice 2 hydrogen bonds from the nearby environment from this side. The system will always move in this direction. Okay, so if it moves in this direction, it is gaining 4 hydrogen bonds, but it is sacrificing 2 hydrogen bonds only. So system always will try to move towards low energy situation. Okay, by making 4 hydrogen bonds, the system is going to lose approximately 16 kilojoules of energy, but here it is gaining some 8 kilojoules. So net 8 kilojoules of energy loss is there. So that's the reason why the protein will try to move in this direction and make hydrogen bonds with this. The conformational flexibility in this region allows the protein to make this physical movement. Okay, so in that way enzymes are going to work because of this semi-flexible nature that is inbuilt in proteins in this way. So to summarize everything, the molecular structure of a protein, so in the structure we have to see, we can perceive the structure of a protein at 4 levels: in the primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure and quaternary structure. Okay, in primary structure we focus on the amino acid sequence. Okay, the sequence of amino acids, no structural information is obtained over here, but here in the secondary structure we will have a little bit of knowledge on the fragments and their structural alignments. Okay, like wherever how many different types of loop regions are there, or else the helical regions are there, all of them we are going to get an idea. And in tertiary structure, the complete 3-dimensional structure of a monomer is obtained. In quaternary structure, the 3-dimensional structure of a protein in its functional form. A monomer need not always be functional. So that's the reason why we need to see the functional form of a protein. Sometimes the protein is associated with so many other proteins to become functional. I'll give you an example for that also. So this quaternary structure gives you a function. How many different functions of proteins are there? Proteins does innumerable functions. You name a function, it will do that. Like some of the examples like signaling. In case of signaling, you will find several molecules. Okay, so in this you can see insulin. Insulin is a regulatory hormone. Whenever glucose levels are increasing in your body, insulin will be released, so that insulin acts as a signaling molecule, so that skeletal muscles and liver pick up the glucose from blood circulation. Okay, so in case of inflammatory condition, we have interleukins. Interleukins are also peptides. So they are what we call it as chemokine. Okay, so they help guide white blood cells to come to the affected site, where actually inflammation is there. Okay, so it is like that, signaling. Then transport across a membrane happens via transporter proteins. So these proteins physically hold on to the food material or the carbohydrate material or amino acid, and they will physically transport it across the membrane. And ion transporters are a classical examples, where ion channels, etc. Catalysis, enzymes, all enzymes are proteins, but not all proteins are enzymes. Okay, so that we know. Okay, most probably in 10th class or otherwise in your +2 level, it might be there. Then movement. For movement, physical movement, we need proteins. Okay, your skeletal muscle is made up of fibrous proteins. Actin and myosin filaments will be there. Then in cell structure maintenance, for a cell you have in the cell membrane only phospholipid bilayer will be there. It will not have enough strength to retain its structural integrity. Okay, so that's the reason why it is it will contain a skeleton of proteins. Okay, so many fibers will be there, which offers structural stability to a protein. and then regulation. Okay, regulatory proteins like in cell cycle regulation is done by various proteins which are released at different stages of cell division. Okay, in the mitosis or meiosis, the cell cycle is regulated via hormonal protein regulation, hormonal regulation only. So those are mostly proteins. So friends, this is the reason why proteins are very important biomolecules in our body. To give you one more example, so here you can see the proteins, they work in coordination with each other. So here RNA replication enzyme is what I am showing over here, where one of the protein is offering stable site for some reactions to happen. Okay, this is the platform. So on which one of the site is recognizing the half sequence, okay, gene sequence, and then on the other side the protein RNA polymerase molecules are coming, mRNA, some proteins are coming and attaching onto the other protein and doing some job, and then they are leaving. If you see this pathway, this is like an automated pathway done by some kind of a molecular machine. So this is the reason why proteins are also called as molecular machines. Okay, they does the physical job. See here, they are coming over here, they are recognizing the site of action, attaching and then doing some job and then leaving. Okay, so this is the way how. So friends, proteins are everywhere. Proteins are responsible for who we are. Proteins does all the functions in our body. Proteins control our biochemistry. So that's the reason why we need to have a comprehensive knowledge on protein three-dimensional structure, its biosynthesis, its mechanism of action, or principles behind its function. So to obtain a clear idea on health or disease status of a human being. So here I am showing you the vast expanse of the protein world. Okay, so this is actually the blown out, the clear cut picture of various controlling mechanisms that we have in the working of insulin receptor. See how many different kinds of regulatory mechanisms are there to take care of glucose transport via insulin mediated receptor action. Okay, so that's the reason why, friends, we need to have a very clear idea on protein three-dimensional structure, the principles behind its function also. I hope you do agree with me if I say that the proteins are the critical molecules in our biochemistry which decides the health or disease status of a person. Okay, we will meet again in the next lecture with amino acid digestion, protein digestion and absorption and its regulation. Okay, so see you all with another very interesting lecture soon. Thank you.